Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
3 minutes after 10, brace yourselves, we're going in, OK? Look at today's news. John Major joins Gordon Brown in condemning the rolling out of universal credit. That is a former Conservative Prime Minister and a former Labour Prime Minister joining forces, sort of joining forces. I mean, they're acting independently, but they're arriving at the same conclusion-ish. What's happened to two-party politics? The Conservative Party now has a band of MPs determined to reject Theresa May's Brexit deal on the grounds that no deal is better than a bad deal, and another band of Conservative MPs determined to reject Theresa May's Brexit deal because they think it will enhance the chances of a second referendum. And they are ostensibly in the same party, singing from the same hymn sheet. Ken Clarke, in the House of Commons yesterday, essentially described many of his own colleagues as nationalists, came as close as he can within the confines of parliamentary convention to calling them racists. And they're in the same party. And we haven't even mentioned Labour. I cannot for the life of me think of a time in recent British political history, and my history isn't good enough to know about some of the other sort of key issues. I know what the Suez Crisis was, I know how it happened and how it unfolded, but I don't know what was really happening in Parliament at the time. Don't ring me to tell me, we'll save that for another day. But I cannot for the life of me think of a parliamentary landscape that looked as confused and as confusing as the current one. And I've got a horrible feeling that's why we are sort of being discouraged from talking about it. Why on earth have the Times led with employers must reveal ethnic pay gap of staff on a day when the parliamentary arithmetic is such that we could see any one of a dizzying array of cataclysmic occurrences unfold in the next 2 or 3 weeks? One Conservative backbencher has just tweeted very winningly about how there is no vacancy for the leadership. I don't know why everyone's talking about it. However, we could have a new leader in place within a fortnight if it were to transpire that we needed to do so. And then you've got the other story, a story I quite like, actually, Jeremy Corbyn's attempt to sort of draw slightly different conclusions from British history. But that is really insane to be seeing that as a priority at the moment when current British history is being written and nobody knows what the next line will be, least of all me. And this is quite a refreshing position to find myself in, because there have been few more dispiriting experiences in my life, both professionally and personally, than seeing almost all of my worst fears about Brexit come slowly and inexorably true. I have no idea what happens now. I have no idea what happens now, because we're back to human agency. We're back to how will people behave. Nobody can ever really predict that. What will happen when the Good Friday Agreement comes up against the red lines that Theresa May laid out in the Mansion House speech? Well, I can work that out. I can tell you. You can disagree. You can put your fingers in your ears and shout fish. But I know I'm right on that, because I'm looking at analysis of written down words. Similarly, when you speak to people in the haulage industry about what might happen in the event of no deal, and they provide you with the detail and the paperwork that you need, you know what is going to happen. You can persuasively and convincingly put together a case. I don't know if you've seen Faisal Islam's story over at Sky News about the haulage industry being compelled to sign non-disclosure agreements with the government. He broke this in March. It's now been confirmed. So you remember our Kieran, our van driver, which is a slightly inaccurate description of him, but why were relatively small-scale players ringing me up to tell us about the chaos that would ensue on our borders with regard to haulage and transport, while the massive players in the industry were silent? Answer, we now know. The massive players in the industry, and indeed the lobbyists, were ordered to sign non-disclosure agreements by government. So they'd go in to talk to the government about their fears on the condition that they promised not to talk to anybody else about their evidence-based fears. That's quite unprecedented, but Brexit's broken everything, absolutely everything. So now even that, big business groups banned from telling the public about the reality around the corner as a condition of explaining to the government why they're so fearful of the reality around the corner. You thought I was exaggerating 6 months ago. Well, you know I'm not now. Similarly, you have this astonishing attempt, the contortions that are now being undertaken by people who insist that they still love Brexit, the contortions that are still being undertaken are quite incredible. I mean, genuinely incredible. You have the absurd Quentin Letts in the Daily Mail today, and he can really write. But he's today saying he's going to vote for Jeremy Corbyn because he's so disappointed in Theresa May. So there you have a very prominent, very right-wing journalist, so incapable of admitting that his beloved Brexit is an absolute disaster that now, in an attempt to give himself a little bit more breathing space, to kick the can a little bit further down the road, he's claiming in print that he's going to vote for Jeremy Corbyn, neatly overlooking, of course, as is the wont of newspaper columnists, that he doesn't actually live in Jeremy Corbyn's constituency. So the madness is almost unparalleled. It is, I mean, genuinely epic. And I think I can say that without actually upsetting anybody, because the lunatic fringe, well, that's going to upset somebody, but the lunatic fringe of the Brexit movement, represented by your Jacob Rees-Moggs, and I think he means it, and your Boris Johnson, who clearly doesn't mean it, but has decided that's the only horse he can currently hitch himself to, they're as cross with Theresa May as people who would describe themselves as hardcore Remainers. Because this deal that she's going to put through is probably the least bad that can be realistically done, but that's still too bad for Remainers and not bad enough for the people that want to burn the whole house down, i.e. Jacob Rees-Mogg and co. And then you've got the DUP, who received the £1 billion from the government in return for the 10 votes that Theresa May needed to have an operational working majority. They've now threatened to vote down the budget, which is historically a vote of no confidence in the government, if the deal, as it inevitably must, we've been explaining this to you for 2 years, if you accommodate the Good Friday Agreement, then the border in Ireland is probably going to have to be in the Irish Sea, which is something that the DUP won't countenance. So that £1 billion bung to get the DUP to back up Theresa May appears to have been the worst value bribe in the history of bribes. Are you still with me at the back? And then both sides are claiming they've got the numbers, which means that Theresa May is going to Labour MPs and essentially trying to argue that, look, it's not perfect. There is one good line I heard Michael Gove say, I think, this week, which is we shouldn't let... good is not the enemy of perfect, or perfect is not the... Oh, I've forgotten what the line was. Never mind. Someone will remind me. But the idea that there is no perfect deal, therefore you should back this one, is quite compelling until somebody else points out, but it's not as good as what we've currently got. And what we've currently got is not no deal. A lot of people are labouring under the illusion that no deal means staying as we are. You still with me at the back? How the hell are we going to unravel all this? I mean, what is... parliamentary politics in Britain? Two-party politics, right? That's the party that... one of them contains Ken Clarke and Jacob Rees-Mogg, and the other party contains Chris Williamson and Hilary Benn. I mean, the idea that those are two recognisable, coherent positions is palpably absurd, isn't it? That there are about 40 parties in Parliament at the moment. There are about 5, realistically, with relevance to Brexit, all of whom, as this vote looms, could conceivably pull it off. God, he's good, isn't he? I am incorrigible. He's already there. Let's not make the perfect the enemy of the good. And that is what people like Gove are now saying, while desperately hoping that people like you and me stop pointing out that what he's describing as good, although not perfect, is, compared to what we've currently got, demonstrably bad. I'm going home. It's 11 minutes after 10. The number you need is 03456060973. I've had a go at explaining what's going on. Part of me wants to invite you to do the same, in the hope that you might actually do a slightly better job of it. 03456060973. But in terms of what's actually going to happen next, when you set it against the context of taking back control, and I think there are still people here who can say that phrase without sniggering or collapsing into fits of giggles. One day it will be up there with strong and stable as on the list of the most ill thought out and inaccurate political slogans in history. But in terms of taking back control, we now have a situation in which the balance of power in the British Parliament could be held either by 10 Northern Irish MPs, who, in the context of Brexit, were on the winning side nationally, but the losing side locally, you could have the balance of power held by the absolute disaster capitalist headbangers, mixed in with a smattering of racists, the sort of ERG-style outlook on the world, coupled with, there's three strands to that. There's the nationalism stroke racism, there's the disaster capitalism, and then there's the weapons-grade stupidity, probably best represented by Nadine Dorries, although people like Owen Paterson give her a decent run for her money at the moment. Owen Paterson's latest intervention is to suggest that people knew that we were leaving the customs union and the single market because they believed the people who told them that, the people that we called liars. People voted for us, Owen Paterson argued this week, because they didn't believe us. That's where we are now in British politics. So the balance of power could be held by the DUP, it could be held by a minority of conservative headbangers, or it could be held by a minority of conservative moderates, or it could be held by about 30 Labour MPs that Theresa May is trying to woo with the "don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good" school of thought. Anybody? I mean, this is absolutely nuts, and I can't make any sense of it now. I have no idea what's going to happen, who's going to jump in which direction, who's going to get into bed with whom, who is going to end up on top at the end of it all. I don't even know who's going to be leader of the Conservative Party between now and Christmas. And that is really frightening, because, and genuinely frightening, because what it tells us is that the rules-based institutions upon which this country relies for stability, security, and relative prosperity are so profoundly under threat now by confusion and division that it's almost impossible to say anything with confidence, let alone certainty, about the near future, never mind the long-term future. And that's really frightening. So, for example, the DUP vote against the budget gets defeated. Historically, that would be a vote of no confidence. But Brexit has broken that historical precedent. Theresa May will try to hang on. Jeremy Corbyn doesn't really have a policy on the single biggest issue facing the country, and yet he stands in the wings, observing the unfolding disaster, knowing that it increases every day the likelihood of him becoming Prime Minister. A prospect which many of us who quite like some of his policies find chilling on the grounds of believing that he's not personally fit for the office. Have you ever known British politics to be quite as confused and as confusing as this? Or can you pick it? Can you unpick it in a way that will help the rest of us feel a little less baffled? And I don't like coming on air. You know me, I'm a extremely cocky individual when it comes to the analysis of recent political events. I've hugely enjoyed getting stuff right, and absolutely hated the fact that every time I'm proved right, it makes the country worse. It makes the future look bleaker. I have no idea what happens now. Genuinely no idea. I know how we got here. It was always inevitable when a massive nation-changing vote saw essentially emotion triumph over reason. It saw feelings beat facts, and that's normal. All of us live our lives sometimes allowing feelings to overcome facts. But of course, the people who fostered those feelings cannot ever admit that they did so dishonestly or indeed ignorantly. So you're left with people like Quentin Letts saying he's going to vote for Jeremy Corbyn rather than Theresa May, because the alternative is to say Brexit was always a dog's breakfast. It was always going to be a dog's breakfast, and I'm so sorry for pretending that this dog's breakfast was ever going to be edible. They can't do that. None of them can. So where are we? I genuinely don't know. And that is refreshing, as I mentioned a moment ago, but it's also chilling. It's also chilling. And I'm not, suggesting that if I can't unravel it, then no one can. But I do get paid to spend rather more time immersed in this stuff than you have to be. It's a bit like getting a plumber round, and he looks at your boiler and goes, no idea. I might not be the best plumber in the country. I might not even really be a particularly good plumber, but I am a plumber, and I'm looking at your plumbing, and I have no idea. Absolutely no. I don't even know where that pipe leads, mate. Seriously. It could be going into your central heating, or it could be going down the sewer. I've no idea. And I'm a plumber. I turn to you, it's your house. I say, what the hell are you going to make of all these pipes and dials? Do you know why I did that? Someone just sent a two-word tweet saying, analogies, please. because analogies sometimes help us unpick the mess. And that's the best I've got. I'm a plumber. I get paid to do this. I'm looking at the pipes of British politics. I have not got a clue what is going on, how to fix it, or whether or not the heating's going to come on when I flick the switch tonight. Get your bag, put on your overalls, and come and have a look at my pipes. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Explain what is going on, where we are, and explain with absolutely. I don't think we can argue about predictions and prospects. We can have an informed exchange, but I don't think there's any attempt or any possibility of getting a right and a wrong on this. But what's going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? I'd love to know. 0345 6060 973. Fill your boots on this. I'll talk about it for as long as you want to. And if you hit the numbers now, you will get through. Fans of torturous analogies, we're having a ball today. I'm looking at your plumbing, and I am a qualified plumber. Got all my certificates. I do this for a living. I'm looking at your plumbing. I have absolutely no idea what's going on. Seriously. No idea about how you're going to unravel it, fix it, or even get the hot water working by Christmas. So I'm asking you to have a look at it as well. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about politics, not actual plumbing. Mark's in Nottingham. Mark, have a look at my pipes.
James, I think, to be perfectly frank, I think as your plumber, I've never come across a heating system like this before. I think it's when you actually look at the situation and you talk over the different permutations.
Yes,
you can't see an answer because there's always opposites who are going to actually fight against their opponent. So the Remainers will fight against the Brexiteers and vice versa.
But the Brexiters are fighting much more furiously among themselves now than they are with the other quotes, side-end quotes.
Yes, I agree. But the thing is that because Theresa May's majority is so slim, it's dependent on the DUP, even talk of moderate Labour MPs supporting the government when the Brexiteers will vote against something.
Well, hang on. Get your spanner out. Let's write down let's start at the end. This sometimes works. So what are the different destinations at the moment? So there is a failure to even reach a deal, and this isn't even a trade deal. Most people are talking as if we're negotiating the trade deal at the moment. We're negotiating the withdrawal agreement. That's the thing that's contingent upon the Northern Irish backstop and the £39 billion. So option one, let's get them all down. Let's do it. Come on. Option one is they don't even come up with an agreement to put before Parliament.
Yes, that's option one.
Option two.
Option two is that they come up with an agreement, say a Chequers type agreement.
Yes.
But the Brexiteers don't support that.
Or the moderates don't support it either because they're hoping to nudge us back to Remain. So there is an agreement, but it gets voted down.
It gets voted down. Then there is an
agreement that gets Then there's an agreement that gets voted through. That's option three. Yeah.
But what agreement is that?
That's your Chequers style one. So you've got so no agreement leads. It seems either to no, but even this is a waste of time because no agreement doesn't necessarily lead to no deal. It could lead to general election.
Well, ultimately, that's what I said to your researcher. I think it's either got to be a general election, or there has to be a referendum.
When and on what?
Well, the politicians can't sort it out. The politicians are too diametrically opposed.
This is not sortable. We're plumbers, remember? It's all very well blaming it on the politicians, but we're the actual plumbers, and this is not sortable. That pipe there is supposed to be your waste pipe, and it's going into your radiators. For example, is... Yeah, go on.
We can't go to the local plumb centre. Obviously, there are other types of plumbing centres as well you can go to, but they're going to say to you, I'm sorry, there's no system that actually we can...
There is, yes, exactly. Well, apart from unless you can press rewind and go back to how it was before you took that vote and the will of the people was to unscrew lots of different things without knowing what they did.
Yes. Yeah, because, it's like anything. I think there's lots of people who understood partially what leaving the EU was about.
I know what that tap there does.
Yes, yeah, but they didn't understand that actually the tap turned everything off.
And is linked to the boiler, and the boiler's linked to the radiators, and the radiators are linked. Oh, Lordy. I mean, I probably will fall out of love with this analogy as the morning unfolds, but right now it's perfect, because there is nothing there except, well, I suppose, blow the whole house up and start again. That's, I suspect, where Jacob Rees-Mogg and Boris Johnson are. But would you trust them to install a new central heating system?
Well, you see, ultimately, the only thing I can see Theresa May could try and do, and that is that she could get some sort of deal, take it to the House of Commons, and make it. And this is actually, on the off chance that the DUP will support it, and make it a confidence vote.
And that's why you need to have a general election or a referendum before midnight on the 20 or 11 p.m, I think, to be precise, on the 29th of March 2019, because otherwise we crash out without an agreement. We're on WTO terms, which we don't decide, they do. 10 countries are already on the record objecting to the proposals we've put forward as to how we would trade on WTO terms. And, oh, holy maloli. Thank you, Mark. Nice spanner. Matthew's in High Wycombe. Matthew, have a look at my pipes.
Stop that, James. I'd like to basically say, obviously, just going back, the whole reason we're in this mess is that the referendum was poorly worded and advisory and had a 50% threshold for constitutional change when what it needed.
You're overcomplicating things. The problem with the referendum was it presumed that the entire country was qualified plumbers.
That's true, but it also didn't ask the right question. The question was so broad that you get people saying, well, it meant a soft Brexit versus...
Of course, I mean, the Leave side could make a multitude of promises, many of which contradicted each other. And, the Remain side could simply say, oh, things aren't that bad. The other problem you've got, of course, with the plumbing analogy is Michael Gove coming out just before the votes were cast and saying that the country's had enough of plumbers.
Yeah, well, personally, I know that people like Rees-Mogg will not rest until there's a child in every chimney, but I wouldn't trust any of them to get any plumbing done. The thing I would say is I would hope that what's going to happen now is some sort of soft deal, a soft Brexit that keeps us in the single
market. That would involve a withdrawal agreement being achieved, which is looking, possible, but then also getting voted through Parliament, which is, I think, less likely than the deal actually being formalised and put before Parliament.
Perhaps, but it all depends. You're right, but it all depends on... So there is probably a majority for a remain in the single market Brexit. The big question is do the Labour MPs and the Tory MPs who wish to have a soft Brexit, do they all agree enough? And can Theresa May rely on the Labour MPs who are Remain not to try and kick her off the cliff by letting her lose the confidence vote?
Because they should be prioritising a Labour government over rescuing the country from Brexit, but a lot of them might actually put country before party in the way that people like Anna Soubry and Ken Clarke are doing on the other side of the House. Try this on for size, because you're taking me up to the news. It's going to come down to people who know that any deal is worse than remaining, but are now sufficiently spooked by the prospect of no deal or an even worse deal than this deal that they might end up voting for the bad deal on the basis that it's the least bad, plausible deal that could be achieved.
Completely right. I think the big problem is that any deal that involves a hard border in Northern Ireland is going to be vetoed both by...
but she might throw the DUP under the bus if she can get 30 Labour MPs to decide that this is better than anything else that's plausible, even though it's not as good as what is available.
Correct. The thing is a hard border in Northern Ireland is not going to work, because even if the EU has that as their working plan, guaranteed the Republic of Ireland is going to veto it. So a hard border in the physical, not on the border in Ireland, not in the Irish Sea, is an impossibility. The Republic of Ireland is not going to vote to cut their own throat. It's impossible. They're not going to do it.
And then you're left with that promise of as yet unspecified technology, which some of the least trustworthy people in the country promise you will somehow turn up and will work. Oh boy, my pipes are still blocked. Holy maloli, what an absolute mess. That is pretty much the only conclusion we've drawn thus far from our survey of the current British political landscape. And if you'd allow me a moment to perhaps make one suggestion as to how we have ended up in such a mess of ignorance and misinformation. How many people do you think are aware of the simple, observable fact that I'm about to share with you. And when I say how many people, I mean particularly people who may have opined in recent months that we should leave the European Union and trade on WTO terms. Like me, you probably, when you hear these people, whether they have sort of contrived patrician accents like Ian Duncan Smith and Jacob Rees-Mogg, or whether they are genuine salt of the earth, horny-handed sons of the soil, you, like me, probably have a vague suspicion that they may not have a clue what that actually means, but thank goodness they're on a station or a programme where no one's actually going to ask them. So Ian Duncan Smith can blithely suggest we'll be absolutely fine on WTO rules, and no one, for reasons I will never understand, however long I stay in this profession, says, do you know what they are? So here's one for you. Observable fact, okay? And again, this is not something you need to have undertaken a PhD in European Union law to know, or indeed in international trade law. This is something you can find within 3 minutes on Google, if you have even the vaguest facility for operating a search engine properly. Every single World Trade Organization decision is taken by its members. So decisions are by consensus. If one country objects, there's no decision. Now, this means that at the moment 164 separate countries all have to accept any decision by consensus. If any one of them, big or small, cannot accept a decision, there's no deal. So when we present our plan for post-Brexit trading under WTO rules, if it comes to that, 163 other countries get the right to say no. So much control. Again, simple observable fact. You have a choice now. If you are a fully functioning human being, you have a choice now to realise how far down the garden path you've been led, or if you're gammon, you have to put your fingers in your ears now and start shouting fish. There is no other choice. Because if you've even said the phrase WTO rules, or nodded along with it, or presumed that the people who were saying it and nodding along with it were intelligent enough to understand what they meant by the words that they actually used, then you've got no choice now but to go, well, that's not control at all. That's not, I mean, how are we making our own laws if 163 other countries have to agree to whatever it is we propose? So either you now put gammon in your ears and start screaming wibble, or you go, crikey, it's all gone horribly wrong. And if sufficient numbers of people don't go, crikey, it's all gone horribly wrong, then this logjam in Parliament gets even uglier. And the prospect of what the light at the end of the tunnel might look like, well, a wiser man than me once suggested that the light at the end of the tunnel might turn out to be an oncoming train. Patrick's in Finn, in Denmark. Foon, it is correctly pronounced. Patrick, what would you like to say?
It is. Good morning. Yeah, I mean, I've had a little bit of experience with plumbing, and I think
we may need to steer ever so slightly away from the pipes.
Well, I did talk to a researcher about this, and she seemed to think it was quite amusing.
Go on.
So at the moment, we are, in theory, buying our gas from the wicked people in the EU, and if we do Brexit correctly, we would actually have a lot of cheap food in the country, including chlorinated chicken, which apparently can make you more flatulent, which would increase the amount of methane. So we wouldn't need the gas anymore because we could make our own gas.
It's an old joke about the House of Lords, isn't it? And you could power half the country with the natural gas coming out of the House of Lords. I mean, I'm all for a little bit of levity and light-heartedness, Patrick, but I think perhaps the situation is too serious for fart jokes at the moment.
Yeah, it is probably.
Don't you?
I do, and I think the other saving cost-saving potential one I had was to make the pipes out of chocolate instead of copper. But then I was concerned about Project Melt.
Yeah,
so
well,
I decided not to do that.
Could be what we call it in retrospect. What do Danish people say to you about Brexit?
They just think it's really, really amusing, and they think it's great if we wanted to leave, if it was done properly. But to leave without a plan...
well, there never really was a plan, unless you postponed the triggering of Article 50 for long enough to put a plan into place. But you know and I know that the screaming habdabs of the Gammon army would have gone into absolute meltdown if Theresa May hadn't done that stupid thing really, really quickly. If they'd got rid of the editor of the Daily Mail a little bit sooner, maybe that sanity clause could have been inserted into British politics, but it's too late for that now. That ship has sailed. 10:40 is the time. John's in Caversham. John, I've got a couple of phone lines for you. Bear with me, John. I would love somebody to tell me, don't worry, James, things aren't that bad, okay? 03456060973. And although, obviously, having predicted that things would be this bad, probably, if not inevitably, I might have a little bit of ego in the game, but I would much, much rather be persuaded that things aren't as bad as I predicted they would be and they now seem to be, than to sit here thinking, oh, God, I've been right about this as well. John's in Caversham. John, what would you like to say?
Well, James, I wish I could tell you that things aren't as bad, but unfortunately, I believe that things are a lot worse than even you can imagine.
Come on then, Chuckles.
I would just ask people, just go on the internet and Google the third Home Rule Bill introduced by PM H. Asquith regarding Ireland during the Second World War, and you're going to see just who the Conservative Theresa May has gone to bed with, i.e. I'm talking about the DUP. They are so set in their ways. They were prepared to join with the Germans during the First World War.
Well, I mean, the party was, but the individuals currently inhabiting the upper echelons of that party are not necessarily the same ideologues as were in the middle and late 1930s.
Okay, but they are the £1 billion deal that Theresa May done with them to prop them up. That's nothing to them. They would never ever give 1 inch.
You're saying you shouldn't trust them even if they've got £1 billion of your money in their back pocket and a promise to do.
They had £20 billion means nothing to them.
But you're allowed to say that. I have to say that it is opinion.
It is my opinion.
But it's backed up, of course, by the threat to vote against the budget, and they failed to back the government last night on a Labour amendment.
Yes, exactly. And in my opinion, I believe I really, you know what? I congratulate you for keeping at this. I think you've been fabulous since the vote. You've kept at this. You've kept digging.
Well, mate, I honestly thought by now I would either be talking about something else because the big boys and the grown-ups had come along and actually made some sense of it, or I'd be eating humble pie every morning and feeling like a right Herbert, because after about 6 months of saying we're all going to hell in a handcart, it suddenly turned out that we weren't going to hell in a handcart, and I would have been the happiest man on the planet to sit here every morning going, mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa, I'm wrong. 2.5 years later, I cannot believe that things are even more confusing than they were on the morning after the vote.
Well, the DUP will vote down the budget. They will make William Hague and Rees-Mogg and all the rest of them look like choir boys.
Oh, you mean as in terms of causing trouble for the government? I don't know why you put Hague on that list, but the ignorance about the Irish border and about Irish history is weapons grade. We haven't even mentioned Gibraltar, because you can't keep the pretense alive if you start digging down into the detail. This is what I've been saying to you all along. And that is why somebody like Quentin Letts, the parliamentary sketch writer on the Daily Mail, which did more to deliver Brexit than any other organ in the country, is now so compromised by reality that he has to write an article claiming that he's going to vote for Jeremy Corbyn instead of Theresa May. Because the alternative is to say, oh my God, those Remainiacs, those Ramonas, those saboteurs, those enemies of the people, those lovies, those lefties, they were right about everything. Harry's in Wimbledon. Harry, what would you like to say?
James, I think you're thinking about this all wrong.
Go on then.
you got to chuck the central heating system, get underfloor heating.
Right.
Electric underfloor heating. It's easy. This whole thing is very easy to navigate.
I'm losing patience with my own analogy here, Harry. I am looking for, I'll throw you another one. I am looking for someone to throw me a life belt now in this sea of confusion.
It's easy, isn't it? It's the negotiations. We're a powerful country. We've got loads of opportunities here. Everybody wants to do business with us.
But they already do.
Yeah, but when we leave the EU, everybody's going to want to do business with us. It's going to be easy to negotiate trade deals, and it's very simple.
You'll forgive me. I don't know whether you've got your tongue in your cheek at the moment, because if you haven't, I'm going to rip it out.
I think I might.
Thank God for that.
Because when you do your underfloor heating, you've got to rip up your floors. And you've got to hope for that you don't have concrete floors.
You don't need heating if the house is on fire.
That's true.
That's the one you're reaching for with your underfloor. I can't afford underfloor heating, and it never works. And the upstairs bathroom, it only works under one tile. I can't get it fixed because you'd have to rip up the whole floor. I don't want your underfloor heating. Here's the thing you can't argue with, you Ramona. If the house is on fire, you don't need radiators.
Because the reality is what we've actually got is you've got to use back to your analogy, you've got a heating problem with your gas central heating, and you've got electricians coming in going, I've got the solution.
Yes. Well, they're not even electricians. You've not electricians. You've got Jacob Rees-Mogg and Boris Johnson turning up saying they're going to fix your heating. And Michael Gove in the corner saying, the country's had enough of plumbers. It's 10:45. Astonishing scenarios. By way of balance, there are people sending in messages saying, oh, the studio floor is going to give way soon with all that foot stamping, get a grip, not another tantrum, which is all you've got now, if you're trying to actually explain why it was a good idea to vote the way you voted. And I appreciate that having spent 2.5 years telling you that you shouldn't have done doesn't necessarily make it any easier for you to admit that you shouldn't have done. But you don't have anything substantive to say now, because your team, which, if you're on the lunatic fringe of Brexit, will be the Jacob Rees-Mogg type team, is now on pretty much the same page as Alistair Campbell in terms of wanting to vote against whatever deal Theresa May can do. The only difference between those two camps is that the unicornists still think that unicorns will turn up, or maybe they never did think unicorns will turn up, but they've still got enough of the public persuaded that unicorns are going to turn up to carry on selling the snake oil. Whereas the Remain side of the argument will be, I refuse to accept this deal, even though it's the best available deal, because it's nowhere near as good as what we've currently got. And that, I think, if we were looking for a moment of enlightenment, that is it, isn't it? That is the little chink of light of understanding, at least. It's not uplifting, it's not encouraging, it's heartbreaking and depressing, but at least it's defensible intellectually. You now have the balance of power probably residing among people who know that the deal, any deal at all, is inferior to the status quo. The status quo is imperfect, no one's suggesting otherwise, but now that we all understand a lot more about these things, the people who know that there's nothing that can be better than being in are going to vote for the least bad exit plan. And that, I think, after 51 minutes of examining your pipe work, I think that is where we are. So here is something that will actually get the hot water flowing again. It's a bit Heath Robinson. It's a bit of a mess. The water will never be as hot as it was before, but it'll be hot enough to wash in. Are you going to vote for that, or are you going to hang on and keep insisting that we go and get the original plans and rebuild all of the plumbing according to what it was like in the first week of June 2016? Because we've got those plans. We know what that looks like. We could always do that, you see. We could always just re-plumb according to what it was like before the will of the people decided that they were going to take a sledgehammer to my central heating. Those are your choices, and I think that probably counts as insightful, does it? With an S, not a C. The balance of power is going to reside with the people who are weighing up, in full knowledge that the deal is not as good as remaining, they're weighing up the pragmatism of voting for it, because the alternative doesn't include in their mind remaining. So the alternatives are all the other even worse plans. So we are now least bad Britain, if you like. But your passport might be blue if we can come to a trade agreement that allows the French company that's making them to bring them into this country tariff-free. Arnold's in Wandsworth. Arnold, what's going on?
Hello, James. Good morning.
Hello.
I'm a big fan of yours.
You're very kind. But you don't have to be. I'm looking for some enemies today, actually, but they're all very quiet.
I never called you before because you're always right.
Oh,
but
fair enough. Wait till you find out what I've called my book. Carry on.
I have a different perspective. I think the recent developments are excellent.
Oh.
It is exactly what we need. If you think about it, remaining is the only sensible option. I haven't given up hope that this will happen. And this would require this government losing the votes. It would require this government falling. It would require a government crisis, constitutional crisis. But
yes.
That has to happen. There is no other way out of this.
But then,
whatever derails May is good.
But Jeremy Corbyn could become Prime Minister in those circumstances.
I would take that as a lesser evil, because I believe he cannot Brexit.
Really? He hasn't made many noises to support that notion. I mean, admittedly, his key personnel may have done. I think it's pretty clear where Tom Watson stands, Keir Starmer, Angela Eagle, maybe?
Who would he be his Brexit secretary? Who would
Keir
be
Starmer.
his international trade? Yeah. But these people are unable to go to Brussels and negotiate a Brexit. They will come back and say, Remain is the right option. They cannot.
But then you have that potential chaos. You know, you have the slightly, you have the sort of gammon army threatening civil unrest on the streets, which presumably would involve, I don't know, Zimmer frames and mobility scooters marching up the Mall with bacon being thrown left, right, and centre. But you would have a lot of unsatisfaction as well. You would have a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Dispossession or disenfranchisement. You could make the argument to people who don't understand the issues that somehow democracy has been denied by doing the sensible thing.
I would challenge that. I think that is a little bit Project Fear from the Leave side. I believe that many people who voted Leave regret it. They would not admit it to themselves. They wouldn't admit it to others. But if the decision is taken out of their hands, there will be a big
They might even be relieved, and then they could they could be quiet and talk about something else. It's interesting you use the phrase Project Fear, because the government's own economic assessments and impact statements are described as Project Fear by these people, whereas a warning of civil unrest or violence on the streets is perfectly acceptable and perfectly normal. I should clarify as well, it won't just be people on mobility scooters and Zimmer frames making their way up the Mall as members of the Gammon Army. There are plenty of young people as well who are massively wrong.
And if Brexit is cancelled, the pound would shoot up 10% the same day.
Yes, but the pound was overvalued, remember? Don't you remember when the pound plummeted? No. They told us it was overvalued, and it's good that it's come down, and it will have a correction in the markets. Yeah,
it will still recover because confidence will come back in a minute. House prices will stabilize. And so within a week, there will be so much good news about this development that these riots would stop before they could even stop.
Well, you might be right. It depends who's doing the stoking and the provoking, because here's a character who's tweeted in, and these are the people you will be dealing with. Of course, the problem with social media is you have no idea of knowing how many of them there are. Can you not get it through the up your head, Mr. James O'Brien, that we do not want to be ruled by Europe? That is why we voted to leave, not for this deal or that deal, or not having this or having that. We don't care. We don't want to be ruled by a foreign power. I just remind you that WTO rules involve 164 countries all agreeing to any systemic change, or indeed all agreeing to whatever proposal Britain puts forward about how we would trade with the rest of the world, having left the largest trading bloc on the planet. So we don't want to be ruled by a foreign power, says this character here, but we're quite happy to have 163 other countries have the final say on what we can or can't do. He doesn't realise he's also saying in brackets. Ruth's in West Hampstead. Ruth, what is going on?
Yeah, I think you were right earlier on that, the chances are it'll be Brexit in name only. And the issue is that...
That's option 3, isn't it? So the deal that they vote through will be as close as possible to not leaving, because trading without single market membership, or at least customs union membership, would be like chopping off 2 legs instead of one.
It is her only option if she wants to actually have a Brexit and not cause monumental damage.
Yeah.
So I think the thing is, your ordinary Remainers on the street, obviously not, I'm not talking about parliamentarians, but,
yes,
hard Remainers, are they going to, knowing that, for the last 2 years, this is probably going to be the outcome of Brexit, and, they obviously didn't want this, and they know it's inferior, do they get on board with it to try, to avert an even bigger catastrophe by not getting on board with it?
And do you think that has been... Sorry to interrupt you, but while it's in my mind, do you think that has been Theresa May's motivation all along?
It's really hard to know what motivates her. I think perhaps there's been a hope with her that it would go that way, but it's really hard to think that when she had so many red lines that would have to be broken.
Yes, but I think the red lines weren't necessarily messages being sent to Brussels. They were messages being sent to the ERG, weren't they? The headbangers in her own party.
But it still made her life incredibly difficult.
Yes.
Incredibly difficult. So
but it was always going to be incredibly difficult. I'm not mounting a rearguard defence of Theresa May by any stretch of the imagination, but even arguably Occam's razor leads you to the conclusion that she has been trying all along. She's been working all along on the premise that we can't reverse it. So our job is to make it as least bad as possible.
Yeah, maybe she thought events would kind of catch up that would lead to having to soften it up.
Yes, I think
something would happen that means it would have to be a soft Brexit. And that, if that happens, and that's, we go along with that, I think, it's going to be for Remainers.
But everyone will be unhappy. Everyone will be unhappy. It's just go on.
There'll be a massive amount of, I told you so. We've told you this for 2.5 years towards leavers, and that's going to be the really difficult thing to to avoid doing.
It is, and I think the trick will be to identify the ringleaders rather than the followers, to identify the liars rather than the people whose only offence was to fall for very comforting and persuasive lies. And if you look at the effort, the money, the power, the elites, the owners of the Ritz, the Mail, the Telegraph, the Express, all of these incredibly powerful elites put into persuading people to do what they did, I find it very, very, very easy to forgive them all.